So
Hey guys, you're listening to Asking for a Friend with your host,
Oscar Villacis,
Sometimes you have questions that you're too afraid to ask
or too embarrassed to ask.
or lack the confidence to ask.
So that's why we're going to ask him for you right here on Asking for a Friend. So sit back, relax,
And enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, happy Monday afternoon and happy Valentine's Day to all of our listeners. Thank you for supporting us and thank you for following us throughout this journey. We have a special show today. You know, we're going to get you set up. What better way to set you up to the future than some financial literacy? We have a really special guest. But before we get into that, a special shout out to all of our sponsors, Rivera Nayarit, Boomer Graphics and Signs, and Mijalisco Zapopan. All of these amazing entrepreneurs, especially from the BIPOC community, which they coming in strong and they coming in hot. So get ready to learn and hear more about some of our community's leaders from the BIPOC community and from the Latin community. Today's special guest, we have Mary Murphy. Mary Murphy is from Charles Schwab. We've known each other for more than a decade now. She's actually shown me the way of. I remember I first started working into Apple. I started getting enrolled in 401k and stocks when I had Apple stocks. And when they split, I made some money and I was able to kind of walk in and I said, now what do I do? Where do I go from here? I was able to walk in and she greeted me at the door and she said, yeah, let's have a seat. How can I help you? And what do you, and then we started talking for hours and started learning. Mary has also been the first leading independent branch leader in Nashua, New Hampshire for Charles Schwab's franchises. She's also the leading investment services firm with 8.14 trillion in client assets. Amazing. The Vanguard has about 7.3 trillion and Fidelity Investments about 10.4 trillion in clients' asset. The company has a network of more than 400 companies, owned branches, and 83 franchise branches. Amazing, to say the least. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Oscar. I appreciate the opportunity to try and help you and other members of the BIPOC community.
We always talk about financial literacy here. Where do we start? How do we start? Do we have to have $1,000, $10,000 in the account to be able to start? I for sure didn't start that way. I remember coming in with a couple of $1,000, from Apple stocks, and we're leaving the company, and I say, okay, do I cash this out or do I leave in the momentum? And for us, it's kind of scary because we come from a community that we don't even trust banks. Mm-hmm. Cash under the mattress, under the shoebox or maybe in the safe. Why is it important for the community to start investing? And with everything that's going on, how do we leverage that?
Well, I think that with inflation being as high as it is right now, I think most people are aware we're at historic levels of inflation. 7.5%, I think, was the last number that I saw. It's really, you're really compelled to participate in the stock market because it's one of the few things you can do to protect yourself against the very real loss of purchasing power that comes with high inflation. And again, I'm not sure, where your audience originated from, whether they were born in this country or they might have been born in Latin America, but there have been instances in other countries where they've had even higher inflation. And so anybody that's experienced that, knows that, you really do need to find places for your money that are going to generate a higher return, than what you're having to pay, in an inflated state. Mm-hmm. So the stock market historically has been more up than down. I know a lot of people remember 2008 when the stock market went down more than 55% at one point, but it's rebounded since that time. It's recovered nicely, and that's partially because when you invest in the stock market, you're actually buying, an investment in a company. So you're going to own the company. When you buy a bond, which is a different way to invest, mm-hmm. you're lending a company money. And so our best advice for folks who are just starting out is that, today it's much easier to invest than it's ever been because you can buy slices of companies. You don't have to buy entire, usually stocks used to be sold in blocks of 100 shares, so you had to have quite a bit of money to participate.
Right.
But today, you can even buy partial shares in companies, so you can get started with very low amounts of money. And so we encourage people to, you always want to have an emergency fund at your local bank, and that should be, it depends on how employable you are, but usually 3 to 6 months, or even higher than that if it's hard for you to find a job. And so, you're not going to make a lot of money on that money at today's interest rates.
Right.
But then you should participate if your employer offers a retirement plan. Everybody should do that. And if you're your own employer, you should open a retirement plan, for yourself, at one of the local investment firms, preferably ours.
With you, having these relationships with and your career path with large companies and local government, how do you recommend somebody running their own business in today's economy and also strategizing and investing as well? Because sometimes we're laser focused on running our business and we don't have maybe the financial necessary means to be able to say, all right, I'm going to set some money aside and invest. How do you?
Well, it's always good to kind of assess your current situation. So not everybody is cut out to be an entrepreneur. Some people feel more comfortable working for an organization, and there are trade-offs between large and small organizations as well as owning your own business. So maybe it would be good to go over that a little bit. I mean, I've worked for very large organizations like ITT and IBM in the past. The benefits or advantages of that is that you get a steady paycheck, and there's plenty of room for advancement. A lot of times these companies offer state-of-the-art training and technology, so you can improve your resume. But the downside or the dark side is that they a lot of them do layoffs periodically when they hit a rough spot or if earnings aren't great. And so job security, it used to be, I know my parents, worked for organizations for, their entire careers. Now it's really hard to do that. So that's kind of the bargain you make with the devil, so to speak.
Right.
I also worked for local government when I taught math, at a local high school. And, that has very good job security. It also has very good benefits. But the pay was not as good as it is in the private sector. And, so that's a big trade-off that you have there. And then last but not least, I'm currently owning my own business. And for me, I find this to be the most rewarding model because it's really the ultimate meritocracy. Your business will do as well as you do.
Right.
And so it's really all about you, your ability to, monetize what you know or what you can do for someone, that someone else is willing to pay for.
What gave you that inspiration to take that risk to start your business? And what does it really mean to start in a business in today's society? Because we have this perception of, put your head down, be able to do it, have grit. But it takes more. It takes a fine finesse of a well-balanced individual to manage it all, between personal and business.
Yeah, well, I think that today, in terms of starting a business, there's a lot of resources that are available to folks, which I'd like to, talk about a little bit later. But
Sure.
For me personally, I feel I'm pursuing a job where I feel like I'm making a difference for other people, and I think my teaching job was similar. I was trying to teach math because I felt that we were falling behind as a nation in terms of our competitiveness globally, and part of this was just the shortage, if you will, of really good math and science teachers. So this was my way of trying to give back to society, and I think in my current role as a financial consultant, I'm doing, an even greater good, if you will, because, in our branch, because I came from such modest beginnings where my parents were struggling with 3 kids, trying to make a living, And back then the investment companies had very high minimums, or they wouldn't talk to you. And so I've made it my practice of not discriminating against anybody that raises their hand that wants help. If they contact us, we try and get them on the right path, to saving and investing, so that they can be less dependent on the government for help, and also just be more financially safe, and so that they have more power and choices in their lives. I mean, there's nothing better than telling a client that they can retire early, or that they can, buy their first home, or go to college. I mean, it's an amazingly rewarding job that I have today.
What does it take to be a financial advisor? What are some of the roles that entails in your position for somebody to come in and say, I have a certain amount of money that I've been saving for a really long time now. I've been trying to get involved, but I just don't know how.
Well, it's usually if you've been able to, so it's two different questions. To become a financial advisor, typically you do have to have a 4-year degree, and there are some regulatory requirements and licensing that you have to complete. So it requires some training. The tests are difficult, at least for some people. Yeah. But if you can and the failure rate, by the way, is very high in this industry. It's something like, I forget the exact statistic, but it's high. It's more than, I think, 70% of people that embark on this career path don't make it. And I would argue that part of that is just because it's an industry in which you're selling trust. I mean, you have to establish trust with folks, and people don't easily give trust, especially when it comes to their money. And who can blame them with the headlines about Bernie Madoff and others? But it's a difficult path. But if you can, if you're interested in helping people, those are the advisors that typically are the most successful, and they're the ones that typically attract the most money under management. In terms of getting started as an investor, though, it's easier today than it's ever been, because again, most of the companies out there offer free accounts where you can open an account for free. Yeah. My employer, or not my employer, but my franchisor has 0 commissions now. So you can even trade, most things, not all things, because options still have contract, commissions and things for free. So it doesn't take a lot of, and as I mentioned before, the stock slicing makes it accessible. And if you don't want to really learn too much about how to invest, there's even algorithmic software available called robots. So Schwabb has the intelligent portfolio, and other companies are out there as well that compete with us in that space. But bottom line, you can let the robot do the work for you, and probably still have a pretty good outcome.
Yeah, it's available on the app as well. Like if you were able to, determine, like, let's say if I wanted to invest 1,000 or 10,000, it calculates for you.
Yeah, it tells you how many shares you can buy of whatever it is that you're seeking to purchase. Yeah, so so they've automated a lot of things to make it easier for individual investors. They let you buy partial shares. Accounts are free. So there's really not a good reason not to put a toe in the water, and embark on this. And plus, there's, again, advice available, at local branches, and also through 800 numbers at most firms. And so, and there's plenty of books on the internet that you can buy that also, help people learn the basics of investing.
Putting your money into a company that you don't know nothing about. What is the hesitation of somebody coming in and saying, I've never done this before, and then entrusting you to manage that money, and then having the perception like, oh, in 6 months or a year, I'm going to be a millionaire?
Well, we try and set realistic expectations, but in terms of like the, again, when you're selecting a firm, you want to look for whether or not they have insurance. So there's, FDIC covers the banking side. So sometimes the client will have money in cash with us, and that's typically that might be over on the checking side or savings side, and that's covered by the Federal Depository Insurance Corporation. On the investing side, we have Securities Insurance Protection Corporation insurance, and then my company has very high insurance limits through third-party insurers as well. So, but most of the big firms are covered by, the Securities Protection Insurance Corporation, and so that helps to protect the client investments, at least from fraud or from, the failure of the firm. Nothing can protect you if you're not a good investor.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we try and educate the client so they become better investors. And it's all about, risk management.
Right.
And same thing is true with businesses. Like, back on the topic of starting your own business,
Right.
we would encourage people to take advantage of some of the resources that are out there that the state and the federal government provide, and also your firm, that can help them put a formal written business plan in place before they embark on any type of business, and takes them through a formal process of figuring out, is the product or service that they're going to attempt to sell, actually something that people need and are willing to pay for.
Is it tangible?
You're right. And then there's all kinds of mentoring programs available. The Chamber, I'm a board member of the Greater Nashua Chamber.
Oh, you are?
Yes, and we have business after hours to assist you with networking. There's some mentoring programs for young entrepreneurs.
Have you heard about First Gen Multimedia, by the way? Has there been a buzz going on at the Chamber of Commerce? Because I feel like they called us once, and then they never called us again.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So,
I'll speak to them.
Oh, yeah,
then.
speak to them, Mary.
That's the membership committee, right? Yeah. But, I think that it's a good way to connect to other business owners who have been successful, to learn from them, so that you don't make the same mistakes we all did. Because everybody starting out in business, trust me, has made mistakes in the past, and but the mentoring is helpful. There's also a formal course you can attend called Leadership Greater Nashua, and there are scholarships available for people who can't afford it. Because again, we want to encourage people who are aspiring to become business owners to make it accessible. So
yeah. What are the difference? We have listeners that we say, "Oh, stocks and bonds, stocks and bonds." What are the differences between stocks and bonds? For the listeners out there that don't know.
Well, just to keep it as simple as possible. Again, as I mentioned, a stock, when you purchase shares in a company, you're actually purchasing an owner's interest in the company.
Right.
Whereas when you buy a bond, you're just lending money to the company in exchange, for a certain agreed upon period of time, and for a certain, they call it coupon or interest rate, that is contractually agreed upon, when you buy the bond. And so right now it's interesting because we have a perfect storm developing, in my opinion, where we have a very highly valued stock market. At the same time, the Federal Reserve is talking about raising interest rates, which would put pressure on the bond market and cause that to potentially have some, issues or go into correction. Yeah. So it's a bit of a challenging environment, and this is a good time to try and form a relationship with a financial advisor who's familiar with how to navigate an environment like this, and not try and do it on your own.
What do you? And I'm pretty sure that that's a domino effect within the housing market and everything else surrounding. Are we seeing another 2008, 2009 again, or?
Well, I certainly hope not. I don't think so. I mean, that was a little bit of a different situation.
Right.
I think at some point, in the future there might be an event of that magnitude, but most of the time, like, the market does go through regular corrective cycles, and it's simply when one set of assets gets overvalued. Typically, your more sophisticated institutional investors will take their chips off the table, so to speak, and they'll go bargain hunting somewhere else. And so it's kind of the normal course of things. And because governments of the world continue to print money, that money has to go somewhere. So it usually finds its way back into the stock market, as well as other markets like the bond market, the real estate market, et cetera. Sometimes precious metals, because you'll see those go through cycles too, where that's the hot thing. So we just recommend that people diversify their portfolios, own a little bit of everything in the right proportions.
Right.
And that way, if one asset class has a bubble and corrects, you're not going to lose so much that you would freak out and do the wrong thing, make an emotional decision.
Yeah.
Because emotion really is the enemy of good investing and a good outcome. They call it behavioral finance. There's a whole you can Google it on the internet.
Mary, I love this. I love that company. I love what they stand for, and then all of a sudden, bottom up.
Yeah. Well, again, like you can have too much of a good thing. Even even Apple, you have to be careful periodically. There was a time when Apple almost went out of business. It's kind of unlikely now when you look at their balance sheet, but
Yeah. What was it?
nevertheless, I don't want to say not possible just because stuff happens.
It was like what 2000? No, not 2000. What am I saying? 1981, I believe, 82 that they almost went out of business. Before I think he was trying to he purchased. Well, he tried to absorb Pixar after he made it, and he got kicked out. Anyways.
Yeah, so concentration risk is one of the risks you want to manage. So a lot of times how people become concentrated is really they participate in their company's employee stock ownership plan, and it just creeps up on them.
Yeah.
You know, the company.
Set it and forget it.
Yeah, if they have a successful company, that they work for, one day they wake up and they're a millionaire, but it's all in one company, and if some adverse event happens to that company, they can be a pauper the next day. So we try and recommend to clients that they, not look a gift horse in the mouth, and that they regularly harvest some of their gains and, redeploy that capital into other asset classes or other companies, just to mitigate risk. So being a successful investor is really mostly about risk management, but very few what we call retail clients know enough to do that. And so that's largely kind of what I spend a lot of my time trying to educate clients on. It's not absolute return, which is hitting the ball out of the park as far as you can, can end badly and is hard to achieve on a consistent basis unless you're like a Peter Lynch or something, or a Warren Buffett. It's much more prudent, if you will, to try and eliminate as many risks as you can in your investing. And
How so?
in this way, you're going to end up with, more predictably good results over time. And, you don't have to be right all the time. It's impossible for anybody to be right all the time. But this will improve your ratio of being right more than you're wrong.
What are some of the companies that we might be working for? Maybe some of our listeners might be working for right now. They're like, I can't afford to put 4% or 6% of my paycheck to a 401k. I need all of my checks.
Well, so if you're thinking that is your challenge, if you will, consider that, again, for some people at least, if you're in an income bracket where you're having to pay income taxes, when you make contributions to a tax deferred, whether it's an IRA or an employer retirement plan, some of that might be tax deductible. So you're sort of keeping money in your pocket for today when a dollar is more valuable than a dollar tomorrow. Also, many companies, not all companies, but many companies will provide some type of employee match. So you're giving up free money, which is also, something you shouldn't be doing if you're trying to get ahead. So, and it's
Free
not
money?
it's not just the obvious like employer retirement accounts you should be looking at. There's something called a health savings account, which in some companies, can be investable. But what health savings accounts do is they'll defer taxes on money that you're setting aside for anything that is health related expenses, on an approved IRS list. And if you invest that money for the long term instead of spending it, now, you can use it to offset Medicare premiums when you're older, after you've shut off your paycheck, and you might need that money.
What are you talking about? That's going to be non-existent for us.
Oh no, it'll still be there. And also,
We hope.
Yeah, and also, you can use it for your long-term care, which about 70% of the population, will probably experience some type of long-term care event, and yet very few people are planning for that, and that's going to be our next crisis, in my opinion. It's really going to be, just lack of trained healthcare personnel to support the massive bubble of elderly that are, the boomers represent.
We're feeling it right now.
Yeah.
It's a forever fast turnaround positions, jobs, nursing homes, retirement, rehabilitation center, just constantly you'll never see the same person over and over again. It's just crazy, the non-consistency. But asking for a friend, we have my producer. She actually she did a face when you talked about the medical
The health savings
the
account.
health savings account.
Yeah, because my husband has a health savings account through the post office. So like we're slowly learning to invest what money we have, and figuring out how those things, but I never knew how that's how the health savings account worked. So and we've been throwing money in it, but we didn't know like what it was used for. And so we were like, okay, well we'll just, keep saving and see how that goes. And
yeah, it can be tax deductible, at least part of it. And again, as long as you're using the money you take out of it for healthcare related things that are on the IRS approved list, you don't have to pay taxes on any growth in that account. So that's why we encourage people to do that, as well as the employer retirement accounts if they can afford it. So speaking of affording, so again, I never tell clients to do that which I am not willing to do. And so I have struggled to stay on budgets just like everybody else. And so I gave up on that, and I came up with a better plan, which is really automatic investing. And so what I do is every month I started by figuring out first, what am I spending, where's all my money going, and is there anything that I'm unhappy with that I'm spending money on that I could stop? And, I tried to pick a reasonable amount that I could set aside each month that was achievable just to start. And I have that whisked out of the account that my paycheck goes into, and into the account, either into a savings, or rather a retirement account or a non-retirement account, because I try and save before I get there for my next car purchase, because usually I buy cars every 7 to 8 years, and they're so expensive now that if I don't save a little bit at a time leading up to that, I'm not going to have the down payment. Or I might want to pay cash for it. Depends on what the interest rates are at the time I'm going to buy something. So I would encourage everybody to kind of look at your monthly expenditures, and the credit card companies make it kind of easy. We do encourage people to keep good records. Like, try not to pay for things in cash if you can avoid it, but don't put things on credit cards that you can't pay off every month, because the interest on that is just impossible to overcome. Yeah,
crazy.
It becomes a giant negative snowball.
I gotta be careful on the Home Depot card.
Yeah.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, exactly.
My wife was telling me, you making a Home Depot run? I was like, yeah, we need salt for the driveway. Oh, by the way, there was a nice outdoor camera.
The impulse buying will get you every time.
Yeah, no, but you've taught me the way, for sure.
Yeah.
Walk us through. First generation Americans.
Yep.
Turned 18. Not quite. Can't afford college, so have to hit the workforce. Blue collar, white collar, whatever. What's your recommendation? Because we like to go from jobs to jobs sometimes. We're like, this is not us. We're trying to break those chains and those barriers of what our parents are doing, right?
Yep.
What type of job do you recommend? How long do you recommend individuals going out there? Because now jobs are everywhere. Jobs are remote. So it's like, if this job is not for me, I'm gonna get another job. How do you start planning for success early on, as soon as you turn 18? Walk us through that.
Well, I think so the first thing to do is really get in touch with, kind of your likes and dislikes and your abilities, because at the end of the day, people do better at jobs, that they enjoy,
right,
and that they're good at. And so one of the most important investments you can make in yourself is to try and get a handle on that. And there's some free or minor fee resources out there you can use to try and get better in touch, with yourself. So I'm trying to think. It used to be called Strength Finders 2.0, but I'm on the board at Riviera University, and they
Another
give
connection. Shout out to Riviera.
Yeah, they give all of the students and all of the faculty, and actually all of the board members, a survey that we took, like, to try and assess again, like, what are your strengths, if you will, your top strengths, and then there's a report that can be printed out that points to what careers would best utilize these things that you're good at. So step one would really be get better in touch if you can with the things you like to do, the things you're good at,
right,
and then try and research for which jobs are these things needed. And believe it or not all high-paying jobs require a college degree. I know I shouldn't be saying this as a board member at Riviera, but I'm just telling it like it is. I mean, this country has a giant need for tradespeople. Now, there is some education required to do that, obviously, because they're licensed as well. But I was talking to my plumber down the Cape, and he was making me laugh. His son, he was lamenting, became an engineer instead of a plumber, and he said, he'd make more as a plumber. And I said, really? And then he gave me the bill for my for my latest Cape faux pas. And so anyway, yeah, he was right. He'd probably make more as a plumber. But he was telling me he went to a plumber's career. It was a class they have to take to maintain their licenses. Right. And he said he's looking around and it was a sea of gray hair. And he said, oh, my goodness, we're not replacing ourselves. And that's going to be a huge problem because think about, how many projects you use plumbers for. It's Absolutely. Just, and not just plumbers. Like there's all kinds of other tradespeople. I've got some masons working at my house here in New Hampshire. And their skill is just astonishing. Like watching how high tech that profession has become is just, it's so impressive. And so we would encourage young people to not, disrespect the trades because I really feel strongly you can make a great living at it. It's very rewarding. I mean, being able to look at the work that you've completed, being able that you're helping other people, people who cannot do those things that you can do. And so that's a great way to, put yourself on a path to small business ownership and wealth, in fact. And so we would encourage people to consider, the trades. And in general, my best advice for folks, I started at the bottom in every career that I've ever done. I've had to reinvent myself a couple times. And so there was a point at which I made so little money, I was kind of living in my parents' not basement, but on the first floor and paying them rent because my father and mother were really good at instilling certain values in their children. And they said, the minute you hit 18, we have no legal obligation for you anymore. And so we're going to treat you that way. And so if we couldn't afford our own apartment, we had to pay them rent. And they never gave us any money because they felt that we would view it more as monopoly money if they did. And so everything that I have, I had to earn. So I can really appreciate these young people just starting out because been there, done that. I had 4, you'll appreciate this, I had 4 female roommates at one point. It was miserable. Could not wait to get out of that apartment, I'm telling you. So anyway, I was highly motivated. But why I was successful in each of these careers is because for every job I got, I was grateful because it was so difficult for me to get my first job because there were too many of us. I was born at the very peak of the baby boom, and so there were not enough jobs for as many of us as there were. And even though I tested out of some college, so I graduated early, it wasn't, it didn't matter. There were just too many of us and too few jobs. So I think what the secret to my success is I treated each job with gratitude as if it was my dream job. Right. And that gets noticed by supervisors. Absolutely. And you get moved up quickly if, they see that you're delivering value for the, unexpectedly, for how much they're paying you.
Run it like if your name was on the door.
Yep, right, exactly. And I think the other thing, too, is that I, really tried to learn the business that I was in. And that way, again, you're able to, rise above your entry-level job into more interesting work. And you can bridge from different, jobs to other even industries, if you will, because there's certain things that are transferable, especially skills in, supervision of other people, the ability to communicate and persuade. There's the ability to organize or plan or execute projects. I mean, all these things can be transferred, from one industry to the next. Yeah.
So you got your job. You're now established into something that you're passionate about. At 18, you're taking pride in what you're doing. You're starting to make some money in. But hold up. Wait a minute. Bless you. Wait a minute. Those your mom is handing you a piece of mail. And guess what? It's Discovery or MasterCard. They want you to apply for a credit card. But in our community, we're impulsive because we don't come from money. Right? So all of a sudden, there's this company that's entrusting us into giving us a $5,000 or $10,000 loan, and I can go get those shoes that I saw on TV, or maybe put a down payment on this car that I saw that these other, that I saw that brand new Acuras or Hondas or Toyotas, whatever. What is the big, most common mistake that 18-year-olds do that put them in a financial ruins until their 30s and then just derail them, and then they have to, they're catching up?
Well, I do think that the, borrowing too much or borrowing more than you can pay back that same month is a temptation and a danger.
Okay.
And it's not just to young people. We see it, in my field, of course, people come in the branch all the time that, that have gotten themselves, they've dug a hole so deep that even we cannot get them out. And so, we would encourage people to understand that, again, the credit card has typically has a double-digit interest rate associated with that.
Wow. Yeah.
And the compounding of that, if you were to delay paying your debt off in the same month, before you trigger that interest rate, what happens is you frequently end up paying more for that pair of sneakers, if you will, than, it could be 4, 5, 6 times as much as you thought you were going to be spending on the sneakers just because of the interest due. And, there's nothing more excruciating than having to go through a bankruptcy or a foreclosure. And so
Chapter 11, Chapter 7.
Yeah, you do not want to go there because it ruins your life. It can, it can cause you to have trouble getting housing in the future.
Even to apply for an apartment.
Correct. It can hurt your employment prospects. There's certain careers like mine where they won't touch you with a 10-foot pole if you've gone through something like that. There are, it costs you more on your insurance, like your auto insurance and things.
Sorry to interrupt. Let's dive into that. Why is it a risk for somebody? You see that they made a mistake when they were 18, 20. Now they're in their 30s. Why wouldn't a financial or a job touch them, even though they're trying to, work their way out? And maybe this might be the job to put them in a better financial situation. Why is that stigma that holds those individuals back from that impulsive mistake that they did back in the day to being like, well, hey, you might be a liability now. We come back to us when you have a credit score of better than 650.
Yeah, well, it can, again, like those things will eventually fall off their record if they clean up their act, so to speak, and they they really work at improving their credit score. After, I think
6 years?
7, I think
7,
it is,
7,
yeah. Some types of credit dings are 10 years, but anyway, eventually you can improve your score and kind of dig yourself out. But you would be amazed at, if you're trying to start a business and you're going to a commercial lender for money, these banks have deep reach and they can go back as far as necessary. And if they spot that on your record, even though it's off your record now, but it's in your history, they can deny you a loan. And so it's better not to go there. It's much better to get help before you get to that point. And just, learn how to, wealthy people are able to defer gratification. And I try and buy, most wants. So you have needs, wants, and wishes. Right. Okay, so the needs are, food, shelter, protecting your health care, with health insurance, that type of thing. Then you have wants. These are the things that make your life pleasurable.
Things. Yeah.
And then the wishes are I really, if I was really doing great, I could afford that wild, what thing. Yeah. And so we tell people, try and save for the wants and the wishes. Make sure you're covering your needs, obviously, but defer gratification and try and, put goals down on paper and then do the math or get help from people like us to do the math to tell you what it's going to take to get there. Because almost, if someone works with us collaboratively, we can get you on the path to fund most of those things. It's a partnership.
Yeah.
And so, we try and educate people, but we also help them, figure out, okay, you want to be a millionaire in so many years. What's it going to take? How do you save and invest to actually reach that goal? And people don't realize they're in control of 2 of the 3 things that can cause you to, reach a financial goal or not. It's time. It's when do you start saving, and it's how much you set aside. The third thing is what are you saving it in? Like, what are you investing in? If you're saving it in today's bank accounts that are largely paying less than 1%, less than 0.1%. Who's kidding each other? Or who's kidding ourselves? It's going to take you forever, to get there if you can even do it. And so, to some degree, you do have to take some risk on. Just don't take too much right now. Right. And, there's a happy medium there where you take enough risk to make a decent return, but, you're not swinging for the fences all the time and finding out that you're, losing half the time.
And it's not for a good time. It's for a long time. So set it and forget it. Be patient. Yep. Check in on your money like I always do. Hey, how we doing? Well, I think pivot. Let's do it. Switch it. Jasmine,
I was gonna ask, what do you say to the individual who might be
asking for a friend, by the way.
asking for a friend? What do you say to that person who might be embarrassed that they don't know as much as they should know? Because usually that's what I find the most common amongst our community is that sometimes they're too embarrassed to even approach the topic of their
Wait a
bank
minute.
account. You know what I
You
mean?
didn't know
like,
that?
yeah,
like you should have known that.
yeah, yeah, and they have that that's where that trust feeling comes in of like. I'm so embarrassed, so that's why I'm like not trusting, and I don't want to share what my financial situation looks like.
I think from my experience being in my younger years, I think ownership. I think saying I don't know, I'm in a rut, and if I don't reach out to somebody that knows more than me, I'll never get out of this. I can either be ashamed and hold it and still still have the debt creditors all over me sending final notice, or I can go to a professional and say, I've have some money, but I also have some debt. How do I get out of it, and how do I prepare myself better for the future? Ownership. Just own it. Reach out to somebody like I did when I was young. I blew through credit cards. I'm not gonna lie. I was young. I did the mistakes. I don't come from hey, congratulations, you're 18. Here's your college tuition, or here's the savings that we've had for no. Hey, you're 18. We're not gonna pay for you anymore. You gotta. Hey, don't miss that car payment. Oh, your credit card. You got late notices. So.
Or how about the parents who are like, don't take any credit cards out?
Or what about the parents that don't? Or what about the parents Or what about the parents in our community that have taken credit cards under our name?
Ouch. Yeah.
But we don't want to talk about that. Jumping into situations where we've never even knew that we were. Wait a minute. Why is my credit score 650? I didn't apply for anything, and then your credit history is like, all of a sudden you got to look your mom in the eye and say, well, yeah, my credit was not good, so I had to take it under your name. Utilities, all of this. It's crazy. It's crazy. But I would reach out. I mean, we have great resources like Mary.
Yeah, I think, again, you understand a couple things. One is that we're like attorneys and doctors. What you say to us stays with us. So by law, we have very strict confidentiality requirements. The other thing is it's a judgment-free zone. Really good advisors are in the field to help other people. And so they're compassionate, they're empathetic, they're not going to pass judgment. Their total focus is going to be on helping you dig out or get to, the next step of your wealth creation if you're on a positive. Because, again, as you mentioned when I, first joined you, like there were a lot of, there are some entrepreneurs in the community that you've helped that are now successful. And so, whether they need our help to get to the next level, we're here for them to
Absolutely.
do that.
Yeah.
Or if they're struggling, again, we're here, we're here to try and help them dig out.
Or individually for us as business owners to level up, and because I've always I've always said this to Jasmine. Once we start getting financially on our feet, we want to start investing, and we want our company to be, because she has a daughter. We'll have a kid in the future, and we'll like to set that stability. Can I share him the story about the time I went into your office and for national transition? So when I first met Mary, I go into her office and I'm nervous. I remember Charles Schwab because of at the time Apple was using Charles Schwab. So I was like, they have a location in Nashville? Okay, let me go in there. So we're having a conversation with Mary, and she's super humble, like she's a beast. She's super humble and modest. And I'm sitting down with her, and I was telling her about like getting involved with the National Children's Home, and I hear this lady's gassing me up, talking about like, this is what you need to do. And I manage all of this, and then she was talking about all the great accomplishments, and I'm like, I'm my doubts, I'm like, she's like, I'll never forget the time she's like, yeah, and you're like, I love what you're doing with the National Children's Home. She's like, hold on a second. Goes into her pocketbook, pulls out her checkbook, writes a check for the National Children's Home. I just met her. We just had a conversation for like 45 minutes, and she's like, I'm about my money. Like, this is what I can do for communities, and this is why I learned to be in the position that I am to give back. And from that moment on, she sold me. Like, I'm like, I want to be in that position. That's a model that we thrive off of, and I think that you're the key for the BIPOC community and to working together to be able to do financial literacy, because I'm a living testament to those moments where you taught me, and that's what I want to implement for my partners. That's what I want to implement for our community, to be able to say, now we're setting the bar higher for the next generation, for the second gens, because I think it's important. We just don't know what we don't know. And it is that moment of like that fear, or maybe ashamed of,
or like just knowing that you have to own your debt, and like you have to being able to talk to someone about your debt can be really challenging, and I see it from the perspective of like, I've seen a lot of women who get divorced or end up leaving their partner, and they are left in like financial ruin basically, and they don't know how to pick up the pieces. And I mean,
or balance a checkbook,
because sometimes that partner took control of the financial resources. So being able to have the tools, or have someone that they can kind of go to and say, okay, this is where I'm at financially. How can I move forward? Basically.
Yeah, and I think people are intimidated by personal finance, and just as you mentioned, the school system is not really teaching financial literacy, and I wish they would actually. It's really fundamental, regardless of what career you decide to pursue. Knowing kind of basic concepts around saving and credit, managing your credit, are essential, really a foundation to people being able to survive in the real world. And so I think the various firms do try and help out with courses and things. We had to stop our workshops because of the pandemic, but we're going to start them up again very shortly here. And those are open to the public. They're not just open to Charles Schwab clients. And so we would welcome anybody that wants to learn a little bit. I used to run a nonprofit women's group, and it was for exactly to address the problem you had alluded to earlier, where sometimes women are in a controlling relationship, and therefore they are deliberately kept kind of out of the picture with regard to the family's personal finances. And for me, that was eye-opening, because my mom taught business at the local high school of commerce, and my father had an accounting degree, but he was a reading specialist. And so mom was an equal partner in a lot of the running of the family finances, if you will. And so it was understood that I would learn like the basics of financial literacy growing up. And I think it's because, again, she never wanted me in that situation where, my father used to say a man is not a financial plan.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah. So no offense to men, though. But just repeating what Dad said. So there you go.
What is Bitcoin?
Well,
cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
That's like the hot topic right now.
Cryptocurrency. A lot of kids are opening their phone, downloading the apps, and then just from one bank account to crypto. What is that doing to the financial industry right now?
Well, it's simply an alternative, form of investment, and I'm cautious around all of that only because, I hate to date myself, but I was there when electronic mail first came out, and in the beginning, it thought like IBM was going to win, that they would be the dominant mail system because they had the most users. But as we all know today, the internet won. Like internet mail, like, all these different forms of mail you can get on the internet have far more users than Microsoft or Google or anybody else. And so I feel that way about Bitcoin. I think that a standard has not yet. I think Bitcoin itself has first mover advantage. Yeah. But that does not guarantee long-term success. And my understanding is that it's been banned by the Chinese government. And so any currency that has been banned by the second largest economy in the world is probably not going to be a long-term,
But then you look at El Salvador, and they're the leading country that's their number one type of currency. So how
yeah, but
look at that. Or the landlords accepting Bitcoin as a form of currency for their tenants. That's wild to me.
Yeah. Well, I think again, it's high risk. I'm not necessarily saying it doesn't have a future because nobody knows for sure. I'm just cautioning people because there is no standard for digital currency today, and there's a long way to go to forming one. And as we saw with the recent hacking of one of the major Bitcoin platforms,
Oh yeah.
And it's not the first time; it's like the second or third time.
Right.
The security isn't there. So
$400 million, I believe.
Yeah.
Two couples from, I think they were Massachusetts. Maybe, I don't know. They're from the United States, but
yeah, they were from Massachusetts, I think. So I just caution people about that. I mean, I prefer to own what governments prefer to own, and right now that's gold and the U.S. dollar, and maybe other currencies as well. I think some governments have euros or yen, which is the Japanese currency, but I would be cautious of Japan because their debt's even worse than ours. But I think I would just proceed with caution there. It's very speculative. It's very volatile, and I think that people, especially, you want to walk before you run. So if you don't know a lot about investing, that is definitely not the way to start out. You're better off trying to, buy shares in companies or whatever that you're familiar with that are, try and research them a little bit. The public libraries are a good resource for researching companies. And a lot of them own a publication called Value Line. And so you
dropping
can,
gems today, huh?
So you can look up companies' fundamentals, and so I have certain rules when I'm investing for myself. I try not to buy any companies that are not already profitable, no matter how exciting they are, because if they're not, making a profit, they can go to zero. Like they can basically go out of business. So I try and invest in profitable companies, and it is an immutable law of investing that company stock prices tend to follow earnings. So if the earnings or profits of the company are growing double digit, then historically at least,
And what time span? Let's say what time span are they, that they're showing a profit? Because we've talked about this, slow and steady wins the race, and then we've seen companies just skyrocket. And what is something to look at for young investors out there? They're like, okay, this company is climbing slowly within a every quarter. What's something to look for?
Well, again, I think people have different goals for their investments. Some, as you said, young people in particular are in accumulation mode. So for them, growth is king.
Yeah.
For older investors, obviously income might be king if they're trying to replace their paycheck in retirement.
Gotcha.
So depending upon what a client's goals are, we recommend different types of securities or different stocks, if you will. Depending upon what their needs are. So when I was talking about, profit, typically I'm looking for at least 10%, earnings growth and 10% revenue growth. Because if the revenue growth or the sales is negative, at some point the earnings are going to go south. Like they're not going to be profitable anymore. So you have to kind of look at both those things. And there's, I use quite a few criteria in stock selection that I don't want to bore your audience with. And I also don't want to intimidate them with.
Are you kidding me? You are dropping a lot of gems right now.
I know. This is like classes in session.
Well, it's just I'm trying to give you some basic rules though that lead to prudent investing. And in fact, like I would avoid individual stocks altogether unless you've got 6 figures to invest because you're automatically going to be somewhat concentrated, meaning owning too much of too few securities if you only have a little bit of money. So one of the safest things you could do is just invest in a passive low-cost index fund. And if you just park your money there, set it on dividend reinvestment and let it go, and try not to look at it too much. Like when we're in one of these corrections that we go through. One day you'll wake up, especially if you add to it, like we suggested before. If you're in an automatic investment plan, such as I do, and I recommend people do, you're going to do so much better over time because it's effortless. Like, the younger you start, the less you have to set aside to end up with a big number someday, provided that, history doesn't always repeat itself, but just think about it. Like, companies can enhance their value in a way that hardly anything else can do. Like if remember Netflix started in a garage, and then they sold their service to all their neighbors, and then everybody in their state, and then throughout the country, and then they expanded into other countries, and now they're big. So,
ladies and gentlemen, Mary Murphy from Charles Schwab. She just dropped a lot of knowledge. Go back and listen to that again, because you might make a lot of money. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Asking for a Friend, Mary Murphy. Thank you so much. This was amazing. This is needed. And let's set you up for the future. So if you're listening, reach out to Mary Murphy at Charles Schwab. The address?
2 Cellu Drive in Nashua, New Hampshire.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we'll have you again. We got to do a part 2. This is amazing. Thank you so much thank you to all of our sponsors, Boomer Graphics and Signs, Rivera Nayarit, Mijalisco, and Zapopan. Till next time, happy Valentine's Day.
WSMN 1590. WSMN 95.3 FM Nashua. Listen, watch, and stream at WSMN.live.
USA Radio News with John Hunt.
As tensions continue in Europe, Ukraine appeared to offer and then retract